It wasn't one we want for the time capsule, but let's start with the good. What was? I mean, it's obvious. KC Koncepcion is one of those players. Can you, in the last 20 years of state football, can you compare him to anybody, or does he have the ability to maybe stand above all of it?
I mean, I think from the versatility standpoint, just because, he didn't have as many rushes last night as he did last season. But, from a versatility standpoint for NC State, I would maybe say Jalen Samuels.
Okay.
The only thing about Jalen Samuels was, it took him a couple years before he was really as productive as he was late in his career. KC came in, and it was like the third game of his freshman season. He was KC already.
Yeah.
Interesting stat for him. He has like 8 games where he doesn't have touchdowns, and he has 0 games with 1 touchdown and 6 games now with multiple touchdowns. So when he scores one, he's going to score a second one. But yeah, 121 yards from last night, which was not a career high, but the 9 receptions, the 3 touchdowns were both career highs. He was a bright spot for an otherwise frustrating game for NC State. Jordan Waters played well down the stretch, but we're talking about, a guy that really put the team on his back throughout much of that game. It was KC, and he showed, proved to the country, well, anybody that was watching that game as opposed to, Colorado and North Dakota State or UNC and Minnesota, which were expected to be more competitive games than last night. They got to see him and maybe put a little bit of the country on notice last night.
I'm down with KCC, so we'll maybe we can start that. But yeah, when he has the ball in his hands, it's a touchdown waiting to happen. He's got speed that can separate. He's elusive. He's a strong runner for somebody who doesn't look like he's got incredible size, and because he doesn't. But, man, there's so many things. And I know they can use him out of the backfield. I assume they will. But they were not going to show stuff like that in advance of Tennessee. Is it fair to say that the biggest disappointment that came out of last night, Cory Smith from Pack Pride, is that the offensive line didn't look great?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. This is an offensive line that returned 4 starters from last season. The expectation was, hey, they're all, everything we had heard was, Tim McKay getting to focus on playing right guard as opposed to, switching from tackle to guard. He was going to be much improved. And, a guy like Ja'Karius Peak was going to be, the guy along the right tackle spot. And then, Anthony Carter Jr., it sounded like he was going to be better. Just didn't see a ton of push. I'll have to go back and look at the full film to see, who was at fault there and things along those lines for certain individual plays. But, Ja'Karius Peak got called for the ineligible player downfield on the big touchdown that seemed like a momentum-changing, moment there for NC State. And, yes, they did end up scoring on that drive later, but that if you get that, you could just feel the electricity in the stadium, and all of a sudden that was just taken out by just a silly penalty for him being downfield. So, yes, I think the biggest concern that you have coming out of this is, the expectation was that those are your best guys, and those are the guys you're probably going to stick with. And there just wasn't a ton of competition for those guys, throughout spring and fall camp. So that's what you're going to have to stick with. They have to be the ones that showed the most improvement to me between week 1 and week 2 before you face a much different beast this upcoming weekend in Tennessee. So, yeah, they've all got to get better. And I think, there was a couple of times where, Jordan Waters probably could have gotten out of a couple, 2-string tackles, but there was way too many times where he was having to bounce to the outside because there just were not gaps there in the middle for him to be able to run through.
Right. I think in one of the 4th downs, and they were 0 for 2 on 4th and short in the first half. I think on one of the 4th downs, I think there was the interior of the offensive line had been kind of caved in enough that he didn't even try it. He just bounced it outside immediately, and there was really nowhere for him to go. The fumble certainly hurt Waters, but I do think that he got better late. The first touchdown run, the second touchdown run, that's a short yardage play, and at the hole open, the game was essentially over. Boom, he goes to the house. We're going to see that a few times this year. But that first touchdown run, where he smashed into the line and then bounced off tacklers, backed up 2 steps, and then bullied his way into the end zone, that's the one that I remember.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's kind of why you live with the. All right, he didn't evade some of those early tackles. Well, he evaded like 18 on that one. So you kind of live with the early situation and say, all right, well, he got away from the second one there and made it work. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of having that veteran back. That's what NC State was hoping for going into this season because we've talked a lot about it the last several weeks and months leading up to this season was the fact that, if NC State is going to have the tremendous success that they expect, be able to kind of move up into that upper echelon and try to compete for double-digit wins, they're going to need balance. And the balance just simply has not been there the last 3 years. NC State has not finished inside the top 10 or 10th or better in any rushing category, whether it's rushing yards per game, whether it's rushing yards per carry, or rushing touchdowns in any of those 3 seasons. So in order to be able to, actually have this offense be as explosive as they expect to, you've got to have the run at least be able to set up some of the pass. And it can't come from your quarterback and your wide receiver primarily. You have to be able to allow guys like Jordan Waters, Hollywood Smothers, who also had a good game. His stats might not bear it tremendously, but he had a good game, several explosive runs. They have the backs to do it. Now they've got to be able to give them the space to do it.
Yeah, I think ultimately, even though Waters is going to get the majority of the carries as we saw last night, I think they've got 3 good running backs. It's funny. NC State probably has more weapons than I have ever seen them have. Because we didn't. KC had 9 catches. I loved the tight end Jolly, the transfer from UConn. I thought he was dynamite. I was a little worried when he went for the Waters fumble and obviously got a stinger or something, smashing into one of his offensive linemen. But he came back and I thought was really good the rest of the way. But we didn't even scratch the surface with some of the other wideouts. I think they've got a lot of options, and I'm looking forward to them getting more comfortable with one another.
Yeah, we talked about this on our post-game podcast last night, too, that, there's not just a shameless plug there for Pack Pride.
You got to get something out of this, Cory. I'm tapping into you. You got to get out whatever you need to get out.
Exactly. But, the Justin Jolie situation, again, he would have gone for over 100 yards if he had that one additional catch that was, if I remember correctly, like a 35, 40-yard touchdown on that, double reverse, and he gets it deep downfield. If he gets that one, he's over 100 yards and a touchdown. We're talking about a much different night for him. He was 5 for 5, by the way, too, and not on a night where Grayson McCall was particularly accurate. He comes down with every single one of the balls. Noah Rogers, I remember kind of coming back for one on a deep shot. And, there was another one where the one, target that he had that he didn't come down with, probably a contested catch that if McCall puts that, 2 or 3 yards deeper into the end zone, he comes down with that easily. He's got the separation. He had to try to go over the DB. DB makes a good play for Western Carolina. They had some good DBs last night. So it was a respectable FCS, secondary that NC State was facing. But, yeah, this was a situation where, the wide receivers to me were the ones that shined last night. Wesley Grimes had a good game as well.
Agreed.
Terrell Anderson, that one kind of sideline catch that he made to keep an extended drive when NC State really needed it there late in the game. So, they've got all the weapons, and I agree with you. I think there hasn't been a time where they've had this much talent, and a lot of it is young talent that's still developing. So as guys like Noah Rogers, Terrell Anderson, those guys get more comfortable with this offense and more comfortable playing on Saturdays and Thursday nights as well, I think this offense can only get better. It's just a matter of putting it all together now and getting all those guys comfortable with this system.
Final thing, Tony Gibson's defense is a constant. It was a little slow at times. They had trouble dealing with the quarterback and was it Colombo, the wide? He really should play in a trench coat. No, you won't understand that joke. Other people might. But I do. You do. You're an old soul, Cory Smith. But I think that defense looks like it has the pieces to be maybe not what they were with Peyton Wilson, but I think they can be a pretty good defense.
Yeah, I think the one issue that you ran into last night, and we're not going to try to sugarcoat it here, but losing a guy like Caden Fordham on the fifth play of the game to that targeting penalty, a guy that they have so much trust in him at the middle linebacker spot. He's only started 2 games in his career prior to this season, and he's the one actually wearing the earpiece inside the helmet. So he's the one communicating to the rest of the defense. That's how much trust they have in him. And he gets knocked out on the fifth play of the game, and dropped an interception early on. So there's a little bit of some shaky confidence from these guys too. You're in position, you don't make the play. That changes things a little bit from a confidence standpoint. It's like, all right, now we just don't screw up. It's we got to make the play as well. And I think that yes, there was some shakiness. There was really only 2 drives where they struggled. It was another bend but don't break style, with a 50-plus yard, drive that Western had. But, this is a Western offense that was the number 1 FCS offense last year in the country. So they can scheme up some pretty good offensive plays and drives and things along those lines. But, I think this defense was humbled a little bit last night, and I think Tony Gibson was frustrated after giving up that 3rd touchdown. That was one where you give up a 50-yard play to the quarterback, and then they come down the field and finish it. So, those are not things you want to see from your defense. But the good thing is you come away with a win. Tony Gibson gets to be fired up over the weekend and show his show his players like, hey, you're not as good as you thought you were. Here's where we need to improve, and we got to improve fast because you're facing Tennessee next week, and then in 3 weeks you're facing Clemson. So you got to be ready and not make these boneheaded plays and give up gashing yards, because that's how they set up easy scoring drives. And that's just, again, that's something that, he harped on a lot last year, especially after the Duke game, after Jordan Waters, what he did to them last year. I think that's going to be something they're going to go back to the film room and be like, hey, don't do this anymore.
Cory Smith on Twitter, Cory Smith, Pack Pride. Appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you as always.
You got it.